Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. by recognizing the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga-Anishinaabeg territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The Council of the Municipality of Brighton respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nation are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. I will also note that we are again meeting in person. Face masks are required if you're moving about the what we'll call the chambers for now, but you may remove them if you're seated in your seats. Opportunities to join meetings will continue to be presented for electronic participation. And of course, you may continue to watch these meetings, which will be broadcast through our YouTube channel. I will also note that we are flying the flag of the Ukraine, and members of council are wearing blue and yellow, and some staff are wearing blue and yellow pins that were made by Kathleen McLaughlin and her granddaughter Kennedy. We're doing this to express our community's heartfelt solidarity with the Ukrainian people. As part of that solidarity and as a welcoming and inclusive community, I highlight our unwavering support for the Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, and for democratically elected sovereign governments around the world. Brighton, our council, and our citizens are deeply concerned about the humanitarian toll the invasion will take on the Ukraine and its citizens. And to begin the meeting, I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor Bateman. The council amend the March 14th, 2022 planning meeting agenda to defer item 6.1 to the April meeting. Is there any discussion? Councillor LeBlanc?
Does this have to do with the closing of Center Street?
That is the item, yes.
I can't support that motion of deferring it. I think it should be dealt with tonight.
Perhaps I can get Mr. Walsh to explain why this is being recommended for deferral.
Through the Mayor to Council, staff in drafting the report felt that there was a very small segment of road allowance in an isolated location that was pre-planned, and the draft approval for the Hamilton Wood subdivision is actually, as you may see through the Port of Recall report, it was phase 5 of that draft approval. It's very removed from the part of the road allowance that would be abutting the Algonquin Street residents, the 10 that showed initial concerns of the closure of the road allowance next to them. There weren't any objections of closure of the road allowance south of them that I learned or recalled, but in the effort of being thorough and respectful of any additional thoughts that were previously unexpressed, we felt it would be good to reach out to the representative of residents that were expressing some concerns, and I haven't been able to connect with that Solicitor Jennifer Savini of Templeman Group. So it's a bit of an abundance of caution effort, but that was the only reason why there was a suggestion that deferral might be appropriate for a month.
But council may choose to not defer this if they wish.
That's correct. In the spirit of the original drafting of the report, it was felt that there was not much consequence of closing this particular segment. But I think through internal conversations, the thought was, well, I guess we can't maybe necessarily speak on behalf of the residents there. So again, it was an abundance of caution and second sober thought approach to recommending deferral.
Thank you for that. You have to speak to the deferral.
Yes.
Go ahead.
In speaking to the deferral, I listened to the planning. I walked the property today. There is no neighbors on either side of the property. The same owner owns both sides of the property. If you're talking to there's no neighbors abutting to it other than the original owner. So if we do ask neighbors that aren't close to this, if they want to buy the land, which doesn't apply, So that if you own both sides, you should be able to buy both sides. And that was the problem with the other side of Center Street. So I don't think it should be deferred because there's nobody to talk to other than the original owner that owns both sides of the street. Because if we start doing this, we're going to get into farmlands that one single owner owns it, going right through the center of their fields. And then we're going to ask other people. If we decide to close it, there's a mechanism to close it. There's a bylaw to close it. You pay $1,000 for 100 meters, and you pay additional $100 for every additional meter. So I understand what the concerns are, but on this one, I don't have a concern in letting this go through.
Thank
Not
you.
defer.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. I'm going to go back to Director Walsh, and then I may have a suggestion for council.
To the Mayor, to Council, that I'm simply maybe verifying what Councillor LeBlanc is indicating, that the road allowance that's to be closed is bounded by one owner, and that's who's made the application to closing today. So in that, in terms of the rules for road allowance closure, it would be consistent with those rules in making it available only to that abutting owner.
Okay, so may I suggest that I mean, it's up to council. There's a motion on the floor to defer, but I would suggest that we defeat the motion, allow the report to be read. If at that point we wish to defer the report, we can do so into April without any penalty. We'll have heard what the planner has to say with regard to the road allowance, and then we can make a decision, or we can make a decision to defer at that point. So if there's, go ahead, Councillor Tadman, on the deferral.
Yes, and I have other questions, so I think now I'll be allowed to ask those questions. So I think it's good to run it.
As the mover, would you withdraw your motion then?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wants to make a motion to defer, given the fact that we've had this discussion at this stage? So now I have a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, second by Deputy Mayor Connect, that council approve the March 14th, 2022 planning meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. Councillor Tadman.
Thank you, Mayor. On 6.4, the STAs, I declared before and I will declare again.
Thank you, Councillor Tadman. And the general nature?
Personal interest.
Very well. Anyone else? Thank you. We have no delegations this evening, which moves us into statutory public meetings. Municipality of Brighton takes steps beyond the requirement of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives. The municipality also holds a statutory public meeting on the planning application and then receives a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. After council has made our decision, any person or public body may appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal as long as they have made an oral submission at this meeting or provided comments in writing to the clerk's office and requested notice of the decision from the clerk's office. This is also true of any person or public body that wishes to participate in the appeal. For details or information on appealing decisions of council, please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. And with that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that council move into the statutory public meeting, March 14th, 2022 at 6:39 p.m. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. We do have two items in the statutory public meeting this evening. I didn't receive notes, I just realized, but that's okay. So through the normal course, Mr. Walsh, would you please provide us with information with regard to the application to amend zoning bylaw number 140/2022 as amended, specifically 1276 Stony Point Road? Pardon me, Ms. Deck.
Thank you, Mayor. I will send those mayor's notes next time. My apologies.
Yeah, I'm usually on top of it around 4:30 to say, hey, where are they? I forgot.
Notice of the zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by first-class mail on January 21st, 2022 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a signed notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. Would you please provide us some background information on what the application would accomplish?
The purpose of the application is to rezone the subject property in order to fulfill a condition of consent applications B01-2021 and B02-2021. The zoning bylaw amendment would serve to rezone both the severed lots from rural exception number 1 RU-1 zone and flood-prone area zone to special rural residential exception number 53 RR-53 zone and environmental protection zone EP in order to appropriately address the reduced lot sizes, associated permitted uses, and natural heritage features on the property. A holding provision was intended to be applied to both severed parcels to ensure a development agreement addresses restrictions and recommended mitigation measures through an agreement that will be registered on title. However, staff are recommending that the zoning bylaw amendment be passed without the addition of the holding symbol, as the development agreement is brought forth for council's consideration this evening. Staff will not release condition number 3 from the provisionally approved consent applications until such time that the agreement is registered. The removal of the additional step of another zoning bylaw amendment, staff report, and council agenda item represents a streamlining effort for all parties concerned without loss of intended outcomes.
Thank you, Ms. Deck. And I'll ask if there's anyone present either in the room or virtually who wishes to make comment or has questions with regard to the consent application. Madam Clerk, are you aware of anyone who's joining us? Oh, someone's got their hand up and I can't see the name. Bob Clark. Oh, Mr. Clark?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of council. I just wanted to advise you that we are in full support of the staff report and appreciate the work that they've done in presenting this and also in the creative manner in dealing with the issue of the holding provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Is there anyone else present who wishes to make comment or have questions? Any questions from members of council? Councillor LeBlanc.
I have one question through you, Chair, to the planning department. Is this one piece of land and we've done 2 severances? And I know that the municipality of Brighton is very generous that it allows 3 severances. Could there be a third severance added to this piece of property with the setbacks and the EP land? Could there be a third one added to this one in the future?
Ms. Deck?
Yes, on a property, there could be 3 severances on this property. I haven't looked at the parcel fabric to see where a third parcel could be, but this application was brought forth prior to me joining the planning department, so I unfortunately can't speak on why there was only 2. I don't know if the director of planning would like to add anything to that.
Just a little bit further to that, there are some environmental constraints on the site with some setbacks to it. So I don't know if the landowners exercised the full assessment of a third lot in there. There is the corner piece that was some encouragement that there might be provision for building envelope in there during our pre-consultations over the application, but there are some constraints there as well. And if council would like, I think the consultant Bob Clark can further speak to his handling of the file.
Mr. Clark, do you have comment?
Yes, I do. We did look at a third option and felt that there was the constraints were too serious not to be able to allow the third option.
Sure. Councillor LeBlanc?
Yes, to you, Chair. The reason I ask is because if we look at our growth, we're kind of missing in the rural areas of new lots and new lots coming forward. So that's why I asked that question. It's for growth in the rural area. We're doing very well in the built-up area, but lacking in the rural area. Thank you.
Fair question. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Ms. Deck, do you have any final comments?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Do you have any final comments?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Does council wish to make a decision this evening? Motion before me is moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor Bateman. The council receives the staff report regarding zoning bylaw amendment application Z01-2022, and further that council direct the mayor and clerk to execute the development agreement provided in attachment 4, and further that council enact a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign the development agreement as per recommendation number 3 from the provisionally approved consent applications. And further that council authorize the municipal solicitor through an acknowledgement and direction agreement to register the enacted bylaw for the development agreement, including making any necessary revisions to legal descriptions, names, or undertaking as may be necessary. And further that council enacts a bylaw to rezone certain lands located in Part Lot 23, Concession A, Parts 7 to 9 of Plan 39R 7389, except Parts 1 to 3 of Plan 39R 7939, from rural exception number 1 zone and floodplain area zone to special rural residential exception number 53 zone and environmental protection zone. And further that council authorize staff to not clear condition number 3 of consent applications B01-2021 and B02-2021 until such time that the development agreement has been registered. Any questions or comments from members of council? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And the second item and last item in our statutory public meeting is with regard to consent and rezoning application files B22, 2021 and Z15, 2021, Theresa Plue and Ron and Valerie Plue, 368 Goodrich Road and 376 Goodrich Road. Assuming Ms. Deck, you're on for this one as well. So Ms. Deck, would you please provide us with information with regard to notice?
Notice of the consent and zoning bylaw amendment application was sent by first-class mail on February 18th, 2022 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. In addition, a signed notice was also posted on the property.
Thank you, Ms. Deck. And would you please provide some background information and what these applications would accomplish?
The purpose of consent application B22, 2021 is to sever a 9,105 square meter, 2.25 acre portion of the property located at 376 Goodrich Road and add it to the rural residential property located at 368 Goodrich Road. This application will result in 368 Goodrich Road having a total lot area of approximately 2.87 acres with 49.37 meters of existing frontage on Goodrich Road. The purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application Z15, 2021 is to rezone certain lands from rural exception number 1, RU-1 zone, and flood-prone area zone to rural residential, RR zone, and environmental protection, EP zone. The proposed environmental protection EP zone has been updated to ensure the natural heritage features and associated buffers are encompassed in the environmental protection zone.
Thank you, Ms. Deck. Are there any members of the public who have questions or comments with regard to these applications? Madam Clerk, are you aware of anyone joining us virtually? Any questions or comments from members of council? Councillor LeBlanc?
Through you, Chair. Goodrich Road, 310, the resident at 310 Goodrich Road called me up and he gave me a zoning that I couldn't find and I couldn't find the answer for it, but apparently you found the answer for it. And because it isn't in our book, I think it was put in by the Lower Trent. Could you explain it to me, what that zoning means and why it was put there? Or was it put there as a cursor for something to come in the future?
We'll turn this one over to Mr. Walsh.
Through council to Councillor LeBlanc. The special provision is special policy 4.14.4.
Yeah.
And there's a typo in the official plan. And referring to that designation as 4.14.5, but the effect of that is that there's a source water protection designation, an overlay designation for those lands. The background for that, not certain. There was a groundwater study done and a characterization study done. I think it might be because there's a small drinking water system in the vicinity that relies on the groundwater there. But all that background work was done way back in the mid 2000s and finalized in a source water drinking plan or a source water protection plan in 2015, as ordered by the minister, and now administered on our behalf by the Lower Trent Conservation Authority. So I did reach out to get an explanation for the man I think you're referring about, and gave him an explanation. Now the effect of that is to allow for groundwater recharge. So let's not have a lot of lot coverage. So they're strongly discouraging of things like large parking lots, et cetera. Well, this is agricultural land, so it's not likely to happen. But that is to date my research and my understanding and dialogue with the people who have the more historical background than I do.
Follow-up?
Yes, and he called me up after your explanation. And the reason being because 1 meter of his property outside the severance has this zoning on it, and that's what triggered it. So he couldn't get an answer. I couldn't find an answer because now I know I couldn't find it because of the wrong designation. I could have found it for him and got his answer, but your answer satisfied all his requests and everything. So he's very satisfied. He has no objection with this at all anyway. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc, and thank you, staff, for that, making that smooth transition. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Ms. Deck, do you have any final comments?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Does council wish to make a decision this evening? With that, a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Tadman. The council receives this staff report regarding consent application B22, 2021 and zoning bylaw amendment application Z15, 2021 as prepared by the Planning and Development Department. And further, that council enacts a bylaw to rezone certain lands located in Part Lot 4, Concession 7, and Part Lot 4, Concession 7 being Part 1, on Registered Plan 38R1637 from Rural Exception Number 1 Zone and Floodplain Area Zone to Rural Residential Zone and Environmental Protection Zone. And further, that council grant provisional consent to application B22, 2021, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. That application for zoning bylaw amendment Z15, 2021 is finally approved. That all taxes on each of the lots be in compliance with the municipal requirements prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. That a digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. That geospatial data of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands shall be submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. That subsections 3 and 5 of section 50 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 shall apply to any subsequent conveyance of or transaction involving the conveyed lands. That the owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. That ends our statutory public meeting with a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Tadman, that council move out of the statutory public meeting, March 14th, 2022 at 6:54 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. That brings us to our first planning and development report, being a declaration of surplus and the sale of lands for application file number RC01-2021. And Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Nothing really further to add, Mayor. I just thought maybe I would just highlight one point, and that is the size of the road allowance. It's in the report, but might be worth refreshing our minds on. It's about 15.23 meters wide and I think 40 meters long. And part of that would be subject to a 4-meter easement. So after you, about the length of the lot. So 15+ meter frontage less 4 meters leaves the resulting piece, a remnant piece of not very large or sizable enough to build a home on. So the intended use of this as draft approved in the Hamilton Woods subdivision is one end unit to a townhouse block.
Thank you for that. And with that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council receives the staff report dated March 14th, 2022, pertaining to road allowance closure application file number RC01-2021, requesting the declaration of surplus, closure, and conveyance of a portion of the Center Street road allowance, and that council pass the closure and conveyance bylaw included in this agenda, and that all costs and fees be paid by the applicant in accordance with the road allowance closure policies and procedures, being the rate of $1,000 for the first 100 feet plus $100 per additional feet of frontage applied to 2 frontages, and that the applicant be responsible for all legal costs associated with closure and conveyance, including a survey as may be required for a legal description of a deed of transfer, and that the municipal solicitor be directed by council to register the bylaw for the closure and to register the deed transfer for the portion of the center road allowance as described in this report from the municipality to the owner of abutting lands, and cause a merger of title, all to the satisfaction of the municipal solicitor. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Bateman.
Thank you. Just a follow up for the director, because we had spoken earlier, just so I can wrap my head around it and for the public as well. The portion of land that is surplus that would be selling, it is big enough or not big enough to build a lot on for somebody? I know there'd be an easement, but with the easement, it would still be suitable for a home?
Director?
To the mayor to council, in my opinion, it wouldn't be a very suitable lot. It would only be about 11 meters wide. And even that 11 meters after clear of easement, you'd need to have maybe the additional clearances of the building to not impact that underground work, so that you can place that underground work and not disturb footing. So there'll be additional clearances. So you're really talking less than 11 meters, and you're getting pretty tight in there to have any kind of a single detached building. Certainly not a single detached building that would be compatible and sympathetic with the planned units that are in the subdivision. So highest best use in my view is as an end unit to a townhouse block.
Follow up?
And the reason I asked that is when I read through the report and it says surplus land, I didn't know if the municipality had a policy when we sell land, if that has to be something that's open to the public, because municipal land is taxpayers' land. So is there a policy around selling surplus land but not doing it through a sealed bid process? I don't know if we have something on the books.
Director?
That's a good question. Road allowances are a little bit different. We have a procedure in our policy manual, I believe, and it's within our instructions and guidelines that make part of the application form. And the excuse me. And so the policy is to sell to the abutting owner. And if it's part of a registered plan of subdivision, then we would consider selling it as a lot, but we're not dealing with the registered plan of subdivision at this time. So it's right now, it's just abutting some vacant land. So in summary, to answer your question, road allowances may be closed in the manner in which it's been recommended.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Just wondering if Director Walsh could explain again why the desire to defer this.
Go ahead, Director.
The mayor to council, it was simply an abundance of caution, thinking that there was some significant attention by the 10 lot owners that abut the road allowance along Algonquin Street. And as per the sketches in the staff report, that's somewhat distant from what the spot that we're talking about. It's a fairly long segment of road allowance. And there's really no connection between the segment that is abutting the Algonquin homes because there's an existing storm pond that's been constructed in part of it. So physically, they don't connect. So it was really just out of abundance of caution and a sensitivity to the parties that might be taking an interest and not being presumptuous in what might be of interest to them. But you know, that, like I say, that was a late abundance of caution in drafting the report. It was felt that there would be really no tie between the interests of the Algonquin residents and this particular segment.
Thank you for that. Anything else from members of council? Councillor Tadman?
Thank you, Mayor. And to you, how do we come to the price of $1,000 for the first and then 100 after? Because land now in this municipality is gold. You know, I know of a couple who paid $170,000 for a single lot. So is that a standard price? And when you say it's really not a building lot, well then, but should we have it appraised at what it really is worth, or is this a standard that we have to follow?
Director?
Through the Mayor and Council, it is a standard that we are to follow, given it's in our policy manual. And where that $1,000 came from, or that rate, I'm not sure the full background on it. It is only a few years old, actually, but it is a few years old.
Yeah.
And I think that rate was really contemplated of more of a rural environment. So you may remember the Archer road allowance that was closed on our north limit with Trent Hills. That was a very long road allowance. And
Yeah.
so that was quite a bit of money for his circumstance, his situation, for his needs. In contrast to perhaps here, it seems like not as much for the value that's being passed on. So yeah, there's some natural variation there that the policy, being a broad scope policy, didn't capture that full appreciation of range, I don't think, but we are following the policies.
Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc?
Can I?
Sorry, as a follow-up?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
and probably when that price was set, land was, you know, a lot cheaper. So will we be considering changing that in the near future? Because we do not have many, other than what the developers have now, any building lots, hardly at all in Brighton. So, and I would hate to think that the taxpayers probably be quite upset when they hear that somebody can get a couple of lots for that small amount of money.
Director?
To the Mayor and Council, yeah, sure. We'd be happy to take another look at the policy and see if there's common refinements and improvements that could be made to it. And maybe I'll speak to a land appraiser and see how well they might be able to wrestle with road allowances. There's really not a lot of market comparables to the closure of road allowances, so that might be a bit of a challenge too. But we'll take another crack at it, see what we can do.
Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc?
I remember voting on that policy for the road allowances because I was a member of council when that went through. And I don't know where $1,000 and $100 per meter went through, but I walked this property. And the confusing thing to me when I look at your sketches and I look at the lots on Beacon Drive, it looks like it's 2.5 lots wide. But when I went and walked the property today and I looked at the easement and everything, I realized that the property isn't as big as what is portrayed on the drawing. This makes it, I don't know if you made it bigger to do it, but it looks like it was easily 2 lots. So at 175,000 lots, I looked at it, 350. But then when I look at the bylaw and what we passed and what is expected for road closure, and the owner owns both sides, we have a policy that we have to follow. And those are the things that I respect Councillor Bateman and Councillor Tadman on their comments. That is something that we should look at. There's a difference between the rural area and the built-up area of the value of the land. But this is done, and there's no houses. If there was houses on each side, then I would say you got to give them both a chance. But the same owner owns both sides. So we have a policy let's follow our policy. And that's where I come with that decision. Because I was totally the opposite way of going when I looked at the way of the land. But when I walked it today, I've changed my mind on it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blanc. Any other questions or comments from members of council? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Brings us to a staff report on 97 Ontario Street with regard to public consultation for proposed development. Ms. Deck, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Yes, Mayor. Just wanted to let council know that we will be circulating this pre-consultation application to certain, well, not certain, but to our advisory committees such as accessibility, trails, sustainability, including but not limited to. And I just wanted to let council be aware that we will be circulating them to those for comments as well.
Thank you for that. With that, I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council receives this staff report regarding a public consultation strategy for a proposed development in 97 Ontario Street. And further, that council directs staff to issue a notice of pending development application, including virtual public open house details. Notice will be advertised in the Brighton Independent on the municipal website and provided by mail to all landowners within 120 meters of the property. A sign will be posted on the subject lands. The cost of advertising the notice of pending development will be borne by the proponent. And further, that council directs planning staff to host a virtual community open house meeting prior to receiving a completed application for the purposes of providing the public with notice of the proposed development and obtaining public comments. And further, that staff circulate the notice of pending development to the appropriate advisory committees for comments. Is there any discussion from members of council? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to thank staff for the process. I find it's very thorough, and I'm happy that that we go through this process, especially with there's a lot of concern about how we're developing and the growth in Brighton. It's just important for myself, maybe all of council, that people assume when they see this sort of thing that it's a done deal for some reason. So that is just expressed that this hasn't even come to council yet. This is the process and the time. And I know you do that, but we still seem to hear that concern from residents. So anyway, thank you for doing this process.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Bateman.
Just a follow-up to what I sent the director in a question earlier, so everybody can hear the same question. I just want to know with this one, I know it's just a public consultation, but we have a lot of development underway. We have a lot of development that's proposed, and we have some like this that's going to be public consultation. And I hate to go and say this, but my question was the capacity of all the stuff that's underway and proposed. Do we have the capacity in the sewage treatment facility and the water and everything else to maintain that? And I just wanted clarification on the answer, because it said 10-year capacity. But what would that equate to in number of homes, and what's the occupancy per home that we go by now? I think it used to be 1.5, so I don't know if that's changed.
Director.
To the Mayor to Council. So the residual sanitary capacity is calculated using a formula that MOE provides. And we use our annual wastewater volume rates to input that formula, and the output is the number of units, simply put. And so the last time we did that calculation, yeah, we had a 10-year supply for the rate of building permits that we've been averaging the last 10 years per annum. Staff are going back and reviewing the draft approvals and matching that up with our residual capacities as estimated. We can update the residual capacities because we have now we have the 2021 volumes to add to it. I think the residual capacities will go up when we use that data because it was a relatively drier year. And further to that, staff are going to be bringing forward a policy that allocates residual sanitary capacity only at the time of execution of the subdivision agreement. so that we have very clear controls on its use and its allocation. So allocation would not occur at draft approval. It would happen at time of agreement, agreement execution.
Follow up?
So that really helps if the development doesn't start right away, because you're tying up that capacity. If it sits there and shovels don't get in the ground, while other people might be waiting, and then that capacity is already allocated, but they haven't started anything. So you don't allocate that until.
No, exactly, and that's exactly the motive. One, to allow an investor to get their approvals draft approved or lined up, and then knowing that they might be in competition with the market a little bit more, that they can then be more expeditious in getting approvals and not sitting on the land as if it were just an investment.
Follow up?
It was the second question, just so that I don't want to keep the questions to myself, and Mr. Walsh was kind enough to answer them. It was around traffic issues, because every time we have a development, that's one of the main things that the citizens are concerned about, because traffic leads to more volume, and volume, we all have heard the speeding concerns. And my question was around, every time we talk about developments, we're looking at the traffic study for that particular development, and I didn't know if there was something broader coming that would look at all the traffic, like we look at sanitary. I don't know if you could speak to.
Director?
Through the mayor to council. So yes, we'll, through the secondary plan, we're asking the consultant to take a look at the broader traffic issues. Now, that secondary plan deals with the greenfield areas of the municipality, as opposed to some of the intensification areas. But hearing the concern in the last couple of applications, I think maybe it would be wise to ask the consultant to also have regard for the intensification areas as designated in the official plan too. So staff will do that.
Council recently passed a motion to specifically have Ontario Street examined from a traffic study point of view. So that would, I would think, encapsulate this development as well.
Yes, exactly.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just to follow up to Councillor Bateman's question, if we didn't have the capacity in our sewage treatment plant, would any of these developments even make it through the first process or even come to council?
Mr. Walsh?
Through the mayor to council, that's a really good question. No, if there's no imminence to getting some kind of servicing made available to the developments, then not typically normally. There are municipalities that do, again, to pent up that demand and then work with the developers in financing those major capital work infrastructure undertakings like a new water treatment plant or a new sewage treatment plant. We have a neighbor doing that now.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yeah, just to follow up, if that were the case, though, that would be very clear that we don't have the capacity and we're going to build the capacity as part of this process. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly it. That would be well communicated, and their expectations, our expectations would be clearly communicated.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Talking about capacity, 10 years isn't very far off. When we talk about how fast our growth is, and you're using a comparison of our building permits over a certain amount of time in the past, and looking at that based on a ratio or whatever of, let's say, the last 10 years or 5 years, the speed that we're starting to move, we're going to be moving, that 10 years is going to shrink up pretty quick. So I am concerned that 10 years out, we should be really strategic plan. We should be zeroing that down or narrowing that down to where we're going to be, because the push is coming pretty hard from the government very soon. I think we're talking about that at some point, and where are we going to be with that push? And if this influx of residents doesn't slow down at some point, and with the type of housing and multiple dwellings, you're talking about smaller homes, we're talking about more people, townhouses, we're talking about, so with all that capacity, it goes back to what capacity in 10 years, where are we going to be? And, you know, and then you talked about traffic. That was ideal. That's exactly, that's by number 2. And number 3, it's just the services that we have here in Brighton for all this action. Are we prepared for, you know, so water, sewage, traffic and services? Are we in good shape in 5 to 10 years?
Council is aware that we have a proposal in with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to upgrade our sewage, wastewater pollution control plant that will add capacity to that plant. I don't know if you have those numbers handy, but and I don't think it's been officially approved by the MECP yet. Well, I don't think it's been officially approved. Otherwise, I'd go to you. So we do know that the capacity levels are increasing, and as soon as we get that project underway, we'll see that.
Yeah, not getting excited, but don't get me wrong. I'm just, again, whenever this comes up, and we heard those numbers about the 10 years before at another meeting, but it is something we need to talk about, and we need to be checking on regularly. Where are we going? Because this stuff's creeping up pretty fast.
And once MECP approves that process, staff will provide feedback to council on what the capacity will be and what those upgrades will allow us to do moving forward. So I would expect that to happen in the next 3-4 months, frankly.
Okay, good.
Yeah, certainly before the end of this year. Councillor Tadman.
I think you can agree with when we first came on council in 2003, people were panicking about the capacity, and we've had more consultants tell us we've got lots of capacity. We're going to have more. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. We can't make land, and this is users, the wastewater and the water. So there's only a certain amount of homes that can be built. So I don't think we should be stressing the public out once again by worrying about capacity.
It is the question I get almost every time a new development is proposed, because people can't wrap their heads around the fact that we have a concerning issue at the plant. We know that. We know it needs to be solved, but they believe that there's a capacity issue at the plant. And we've done a ton of communication, even in this term of council and the last term of council, about capacity. We know there's lots of capacity at that plant. We know we can continue to grow this municipality. And now we'll know soon, I think, that we will be increasing the capacity level at the plant for future growth. So I'm confident that we'll be okay over time.
And just we have one problem, and it's ammonia exceedances, and the rest of it is working just fine as far as we know, but we haven't had a report in a long time, but I assume it must be okay. So I think that the board needs to get out once again that we have capacity. We cannot produce more land, so the planning department will be well aware when we're getting to that point where we need a new plant. But at this point, thanks to some people that have done some really good work, I won't point to anybody in particular, but I think Councillor LeBlanc was quite helpful in saving us a lot of money. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that. Anything further from it? Go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
So if you indulge me a little bit, Mayor, I can answer some.
How could I not?
Okay,
You know
thank you. So the thing is, with the wastewater treatment plant and the capacity as it sits now, and with the wastewater task force that this council allowed me to attend and participate in, basically the mania problem that is there with the proper testing, proper data, proper decisions, basically we can't keep the sludge in the lagoon. So that's why our ammonia spikes. It comes out of the activated sludge plant, correct? But it spikes if we keep the sludge in the lagoon. So we got to keep on taking the lagoon out. With the existing number that we have for that we can take capacity, which we've asked for the ministry out of our ECA, if we didn't have infiltration, and our main problem is infiltration coming in, we could have 7,200 homes. But because of infiltration, it knocks us down. The last time we had a meeting, basically, I'm going to use a number, we could build 1,600 more homes. We could build more, but right now I think we have 740 allotted, something like that, or 780 homes allotted. So we still have an 800 home capacity presently with the existing system. The new system, because of the ECA they're going for, to bring it to 4,800 cubic meters, will add an additional 2,000 homes. But you also have a buffer of 30% added into that, into the facility, and also allows you to build industrial with it, to bring it. So if you looked at the Watson report that was written for the City of Toronto and Northumberland County, basically at this council meeting, I brought up the fact that if you look at the 7 other municipalities in Northumberland County, Brighton still has 73% land available for building residential homes up. And that's part of that report that was done. So if you look at the Port Hope and them, they have to look at Brighton for residential home. And we have the largest piece of industrial land and more industrial land than anybody else. So we're very well situated as a municipality to grow. And I hear those comments all the time, and I give them their number. If they want to debate it with me, I will go and debate it with them. But those are the numbers. We are very safe.
We'll let you do that, Tim.
We are very safe in the numbers and what we're putting in. And I understand the concerns and what they've been. If we weren't safe, I would let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. I hope we don't hear from you on that issue. Anything further? Councillor Bateman.
I think this question is probably for you, Mayor, and possibly the director, just on the traffic thing, because at a previous council meeting, we did address doing traffic studies, and Mr. Walsh, you indicate that you'll reach out to DM Wills. Is that going to be two different studies, or is there an opportunity to mesh that into one to save some taxpayers' dollars?
I'll look to the director when I say I would hope that there's room to save some taxpayer dollars, Director.
Yes, absolutely. The Director of Infrastructure and Capital Works and I have had that discussion.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. That takes us to 6.3 amendments to the Planning Act, Bill 13, delegating planning approvals and streamlining the development process. Mr. Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
To the Mayor of the Council, just the one highlight, there's essentially two recommendations. One is that staff investigate delegation arrangements for certain types of applications, normally very small scale technical stuff like removing H off of a zone code that council's already had a look at, or very small site plan approvals that don't require an agreement. The new fees and charges bylaw has what's called a site plan undertaking, something we don't really need to bother and a full approval and agreement, but it's simpler than that, things like that. So that's what staff had in mind for that recommendation. This second part of the set of recommendations to highlight is the request that staff work with the County of Northumberland to look at delegating from County Council to Brighton Council the authority to amend official plan amendments. It would be a certain type of set of official plan amendments. It's those site-specific type of amendments, not what we call Section 26 amendments of the Planning Act, which is a comprehensive review of the whole plan. That is purposely broken down and broken out in the Planning Act to allow the county to do its thing and doing comprehensive planning, etc. But it does allow for those site-specific amendments to be delegated further downward to council. So the manager of planning of the county had made that one suggestion when we were talking about what's coming up on the agenda further about the short-term accommodations official plan amendment that we're waiting final approval from the county on. In the course of that conversation, the manager of planning at the county had suggested that we consider it. And so that's why it's found as a recommendation in this report.
Thank you, Director. With that, I have a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that Council receive the staff information report dated March 14th, 2022, regarding Bill 13, a bill to introduce amendments to the Planning Act intended to streamline the approvals process for development applications, and that staff return a report to Council introducing a delegation bylaw for delegating from Council to staff technically oriented small scale or routine matters, and that Council directs staff to work with the County of Northumberland staff toward an arrangement of delegating authority of approving site-specific official plan amendments to the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding the working with the County of Northumberland. And I know it's always good to work with our partners, but I'm wondering, as we've just seen a week or so ago via an email, will this kind of delay some of our projects, or will the county override some of the concerns that we have?
I think the other way around, Director Walsh.
That's correct, Mayor. So I'll use the next item on the agenda as an example of the short-term accommodations amendment. So we're really dealing with the licensing bylaw tonight, but because of the administrative framework, the licensing is tied to the zoning, and the zoning is not in effect until the official plan amendment's in effect. So the manager of planning is he's just working on his own there, and I don't envy him for that because he's going to have a big backlog. He's had a big backlog with all the member municipalities feeding him stuff, and so we're in queue, and so it did get approved at the county council here recently at the committee level.
It's been approved at the committee level,
At the
not at
committee
county
level.
council.
Right. Thank you. And so, long story short, it's been with the county for some time. And so instead, when this council could have amended the zoning bylaw, the official plan amendment could have been approved at the same time. And so we would have had this 2-3 month delay. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Councillor LeBlanc.
To you, Chair, when I read the complete document and I read the provincial regulation, what they wanted to, and what it exempted, it's a little bit more broad on what you say. I agree with trying to get some of our powers back from the county, but also when it comes to this, that you also have the option for these small things, and I like to keep council involved, but making a small committee, like we have the committee of adjustment, to work with the planning, 1 or 2 councillors that would ascend that committee that would do it. So it still looks like a decision of 2 council members that would be there and not just giving it to staff. And that was one of the things that they recommended in the provincial document also. Did you look at that?
Director?
Through the mayor and council. So what you're describing is essentially a planning advisory committee. And no, I had not looked at that. There was a bill under the previous government, Bill 73, that strongly encouraged municipalities to establish a planning advisory committee, but said that if you had a suite of advisory committees, that would be default or essentially the same or equivalent to a planning advisory committee. If so, for example, heritage advisory, rural advisory, agricultural advisory, et cetera. If you have a healthy number of advisory committees of issue review, then that you would need to establish a planning advisory committee. So I think we're pretty good here with Sustainability Advisory Committee and the Heritage Advisory Committee, et cetera. So I didn't turn my mind to that, but if it's council's wish, then we could take a look at that, but it may prompt a lot of changes in a lot of the procedures as well. So it might be more of a wholesale change than a nice little add-on.
You have the committee of adjustment that has 2 planners on it, and that is very quick and very easy to do. So that way you can set them up as you wanted to do. So you could line up 20 or 30 items to do that would come back as one to the council. But it would speed up everything. I just don't like not giving, but passing on authority that should be coming to council, because that's what we're elected for, is to make decisions, to make sure the residents, and we represent the residents of the whole municipality, and making decisions to keep our culture the way we're done and everything. So if you look at it, we all live in Brighton. The majority of the staff doesn't live in Brighton. So we have more connection with the residents. So certain decisions like this it may change in the future in our hiring practice. But right now, very few of the people that make decisions on staff live in Brighton. The council lives in Brighton. So that's why I would like to have council still involved. That's my council thing. But if the will of council to go and to give the authority, that's good. But we have committees, like committee of adjustment, 2 planners on it could help. And you can call it at a moment's notice.
I'm sure the director and his staff will take that under consideration when drafting the report on delegating authority. And I think it's probably why we all sit around and as council in a planning meeting, because I think we all have a certain interest in making sure we're involved in these planning decisions. That's why we haven't gone the route of a planning a separate planning committee, because I think all of council likes to be involved in pretty significant decisions for our municipality at the end of the day. And just,
We're meant for a city, not
Yeah.
a small municipality.
yeah, and just to, your other comment was getting something back from the county. But in fact, it would have been at the province a couple of years, not too long ago, that we would have had to go to the province for these OP amendments, and then the province delegated to the county. So it's actually nice to see that the county is interested in delegating certain things back to the local municipality, and I'm happy to see that partnership at work. So carry on. I want to see that come back to Brighton. It's a good idea. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm happy to see that there are some options for us to streamline things, and certainly willing and open to what you have to recommend.
Anything further from members of council? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to our short-term accommodation rental licensing bylaw. Mr. Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Mayor, I just have a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation just to give there's a lot of detail in the licensing bylaw.
Sure.
I just thought there might be some interest to see a bit of a summary. So there's a bit of a short PowerPoint
Good idea.
presentation prepared, if that's okay by you. So a little bit of a history or review of what's been done so far. So what are we doing with short-term accommodations? Well, we're introducing a regulatory framework or system. That system has involved official plan amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment, a licensing bylaw that we're talking about tonight, and it also involved a property standards bylaw. And the first thing that was done was a property standards bylaw that was being updated anyway, but being mindful of this coming forward, staff put a new standard into the property standards bylaw about maximum capacity per bedroom of 2 adults. Problematically, some STAs have a lot of crowding in them, and so through the property standards bylaw, that would be, you could regulate that. And what's nice about it, there is no grandfathering to it. It's effective immediately. So that date is in the report. And that was the first step. And so the official plan, it's a policy tool. It explains the rational basis and intent. That's important because when somebody wants to vary from a bylaw or a license, then we can fall back onto the policies and say, okay, what was the intent? What was the thinking? How does this all come together? So it's the big picture view. And, the test in the Planning Act for minor variance, for example, is conformity with official plans. So some places aren't doing official plan for STAs, but I felt it was important to do that. We have had a zoning bylaw passed, and it sets development standards and identifies certain areas where short-term accommodations might be permitted. And more importantly, I think the provision in that particular zoning bylaw amendment establishes a density limit. And there's more to that, but the zoning bylaw is the tool that limits 15% density. And it varies with the environment in which the STAs are occurring, urban, hamlet, or rural. But that 15% is the standard within the bylaw. Licensing, it regulates operations of the site essentially. So it will talk about health and safety issues, parking issues. How is the manager operating the site? So again, we just talked about the 3 mechanisms, and I've covered most of this already. There are 2 types of STAs, those that are principal residents, people are living in them but renting out a portion of their home. A B&B is an example of that. And then there's the whole home, where the owner is not present, but rents out the whole home for short-term purposes. The licensing bylaw recognizes and carries forward all the property standards things in terms of occupancy limits. And so when people submit their application for a license, these things will be reviewed. Question comes up about legal non-conforming. So if it's simply a phrase from the Planning Act that says if you're illegal prior to the passing bylaw, you may, but then you're no longer legal once the bylaw comes in, you can continue to operate and use the land and buildings for which was originally legal. There is no grandfathering on the property standards bylaw, as I indicated. The date that's been put right into the zoning bylaw and zoning is the date when the first draft zoning bylaw amendment was first introduced to council for purpose of public engagement. There is some planning law allowing us to do that. Historically, however, it was always, once the bylaw is passed, it's passed, and nothing is in effect until it's passed. But more current decisions are saying that something gets before council and council accepts that, and then that's the intent of council. And if the intent of council is known, then it becomes operational. Okay. So just talk about some of the dates there. The current licensing bylaw before council tonight was given advertisement in October. And so the version, there's a track changes version in the package that shows all the changes that were made. So quite a few changes were made. And this is also reflective of legal comment that was received. Each site needs to have its own license. It's not transferable from one owner to a purchaser of the property. The licenses are essentially owned by the municipality. You can't convey them on to another party. There's two types, as I referred to. One is the primary residence type, such as a B&B, and those that are non-owner occupied or whole home. And so there's two different standards. Because the number of complaints and other concerns surrounding short-term accommodations are less severe around those that are used as a primary residence, such as a bed and breakfast, the enforcement and other administrative burdens on the municipality are lower. So the licensing fees have been made lower for those. The fees are levied on a per guest room basis. So the larger capacity, the fee for the license goes up. Inspections are required before issuing a license. This is out of legal advice that's been received. It's every 2 years for a non-owner occupied STA or a whole home, and every 4 years for the primary. Sorry, it should be the other way around, that every 2 years for the non-owner occupied. Yeah, it's not the whole home, it's the, sorry, it is the whole home. And then between inspection years, there's a signed affidavit each year and a renewal of the license each year. For the renewed license, when there's a non-inspection year, it's at the 50% rate. License will be valid from a year of date of issuance. That will allow for staggered times of the intakes and issuance, so that upon renewal, we'll have an even flow of work, and that rolling renewals will level out our resources and our general workload and make things go forward a little more orderly when it's based on a date of issuance. So here we have some of the draft fees or proposed fees that council will find coming up in a revised fees and charges bylaw. So as referenced, the owner occupied property will have the fees of $200 per inspection year, and that's per guest room. And on a rural year, it's 50%. And property with a whole home occupied as a short-term accommodation unit, inspection year $350, and a renewal year, again, about half of that, a little just over half of that at $175. The license fee is really meant to be cost recovery. Ms. Black says it's you're not supposed to have any surplus revenues resulting from a licensing fee, and the fees have been identified as being required to cover off the administration and enforcement. The license application will require a complete set of information. As you might expect, a site plan and floor plan showing us what rooms are what, what is the bedroom that will be used for occupation, and what are other rooms we will be treating den as equivalent to a bedroom, particularly if it has a Murphy bed. A life safety plan will be required, just showing us where the fire extinguishers are and exits, etc. A parking management plan, of course, we hear a lot about parking issues, so we're going to make sure that the proponent has a clear idea on what to do in terms of orderly parking. There'll be a nuisance and property management plan. By way of definition in the licensing includes fencing. Other bylaws make it mandatory that there be fencing, but on a more practical basis, some properties don't lend themselves to fencing given mature vegetation, etc. So it's going to be based on the best nuisance and property management plan that is available for that site. So that will require some discussions between staff and the proponent. Something a little different from other jurisdictions is a good host property standards design. So that's enhanced levels of landscaping and requests for some architectural detailing to the building form. And on the interior, there would be some expectation that there would be a good host presentation through local art and history. And hopefully we'll be working with the Heritage Advisory Committee in seeing what materials that they can make available, or replications or facsimiles of materials that they can make available for adorning the walls of a short-term accommodation, and generally educating the public, traveling public of the culture and history of Brighton. And for art, maybe art displays of local artists within 50 or 100 kilometers of the municipality of Brighton. And there'll be a requirement for general liability insurance. 5 million was the recommended amount from the municipal solicitor. And those are some other bylaws that we will be having to take a look at every time we review a license. But so they will be circulated internally, building code folks and the fire folks and bylaw enforcement, of course, and planning. And all comments will come forward to form a full review of the license application. And just a little bit of information there. I think much that's pretty evident. So it's expected that we'll start receiving licenses as soon as we can, once we have the fees and charges in place. And then we will only receive applications for the existing legal operators. And beginning in 2023, we can then consider any new STAs if they are in conformity with the bylaws as finally adopted by council. We have that 15% maximum density, so we need to know where the existing ones are before we can assess whether the new ones are compatible. So they are going to be bumped into the future until 2023. Any questions?
So I'm going to read the motion first, and then we'll go into questions. Thank you. It's moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council receives the staff report dated March 14th, 2022, regarding revisions to the draft licensing bylaw, following public consultation and receiving legal opinion. And further, that council give passing to the licensing bylaw pertaining to short-term accommodations as presented in this report. And further, that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to inscribe the in effect date onto the licensing bylaw to be that which is coincident with the in effect date of the County of Northumberland's final approval of the official plan amendment number 8. And further, that upon passing of the short-term accommodation bylaw, that it be circulated to the Ministry of the Attorney General for the purposes of review of Schedule B fines to be issued under the Provincial Offences Act, with revisions to Schedule B being permitted in response to such comments by the bylaw enforcement officer without notice being given. And further, that the council directs staff to give public notice of passing of the STA licensing bylaw through advertisement in the newspaper, the Brighton Independent, and posting it on the municipal website. Questions or comments from members of council? And I'll start with the deputy mayor.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I'm just wondering what the timeline for the MAP bylaw would be. And also, just to clarify that you said, so in 2022, we won't allow any new short-term accommodations. We're waiting until 2023, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the MAT bylaw?
Excuse me. Yeah, the MAT bylaw, we're having a meeting on it tomorrow. And so working with the manager of economic development and the CAO on that and the director of finance to get something put together. There's a number of options being considered at this point, making sure we're thorough. But we're having a discussion tomorrow with the Bay of Quinte Marketing Board. And so that's one option. And timing of which of getting this together, hopefully it'll be, once we get rolling out with the licenses and whatnot, that'll help us identify where the operators are for receiving the MAT. So we estimate, or I estimate, there's probably about 50 STAs, and I think manager of economic development has indicated about maybe another 50 to 75 other tourist operators. And so, you know, that gives you a kind of a sense of the scale that we're talking about. And back of the envelope figuring, it would be about $95,000 a year to the municipality and $95,000 a year to our partner that we would give that money to for purposes of our marketing program.
And just to be clear, MAT stands for Marketing something tax, Municipal Accommodation Tax. Thank you.
Correct.
And it
Which
would be levied against short-term accommodation folks only,
Yeah,
or
we-
hotels, et cetera.
Yes, correct. Yeah. And a bit of a sidebar, I think it's really interesting, though. I don't know of any other bylaw in history where the province has allowed the municipalities to apply a revenue-based bylaw. It's really kind of unprecedented since World War I.
Maybe after years of begging for different revenue streams, they finally listened. You have a follow-up? Go ahead.
As far as the MAT tax and what tourist organization, is that a decision of council? Will you come with options to council?
It'll be the decision of council for sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. Just to clarify one thing, Mr. Walsh. On page 160 of this, and according to your PowerPoint presentation, the date was June 14, 2021. However, on page 276, it's June 14, 2022. I'm assuming that that might be a typo.
There's two June dates in there. I thought it was a typo too.
13.2.2.
Yeah, I thought it was a typo as well, but ends up two different timelines, two different, one was the initial licensing bylaw and the other was the initial zoning bylaw. That were about a year apart. So take a look at the year. One is 2022 and the other one's 2021, I believe.
Right. Okay.
Or
so,
2020 and 2021.
2021. So I guess if it is 2022, then those applying before now will go.
Councilor Rowley, could you draw your microphone closer?
I'm sorry, flipping pages, don't want to do that. So if it's 2022, what you're saying is we're not going to entertain any new STAs this year anyway. So as far as that goes, that really doesn't mean that's just for the zoning, is what you're saying.
That's correct. That's the legal non-conforming date that's inscribed right into the zoning.
Okay. I have a couple more questions, but I will take my turn if other people need to. Keep
Sure,
going.
I'll come back to you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Councilor Bateman.
Thank you. First question I have, and then you can go back to whoever. For STAs that are currently operating, not all STAs or Airbnbs rent to the same person. If they have multiple rooms, there could be multiple stayers there. So under the different items you had that they had to meet, if you have a short-term accommodation and you've got an upstairs and a downstairs, are the same rules going to apply for the building code? Because there could be STAs operating now that don't have the special ceiling, the special windows, and all the other stuff. So for them to get a license, are they going to have to bring that up to second dwelling codes to operate as a 2-level STA?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will have to rely on my building staff to advise me when those things get kicked in, and on the fire chief. The fire chief will also have to assess that situation. It is depending on the number of guest rooms. So usually the number of guest rooms is, I believe, 8. That triggers the new fire standards. And then you've got the fire rated walls and doors at that point. But there are other provisions that apply. You know, these people are not, if each door's got a separate lock mechanism, then that might trigger some other standards as well.
Councillor Rowley?
Thank you. Page 272, 11.7, I believe. A license may be revoked if the total of all demerit points in effect is greater than, and there's nothing there. I know I read somewhere else in this document that number is 15. Is that the total that you have, or is there a different number?
I should go back. There's a table, the appendix B, I believe, has got the demerit.
Yeah, and I think it says.
So I'll have to go to
15.
that table and take that number out of that table and put it into the
Yeah,
bylaw. Thank you for that catch.
A question about that. I don't know exactly how we're going to kind of tally demerit points. Would that be a little bit lenient? I'm thinking, how many concerns are we dealing with? I guess my other question regarding demerit points is as well, second offense, third offense, will those demerit points have like an increase such as in a fine as well?
Yeah, the intent of the demerit points, you may recall from one of the deputations on our first hearing or first reading of the licensing bylaw, that they're concerned that they had a neighbor that didn't get along with, and some of the concerns were frivolous and vexatious. So the idea of the demerit point system is to allow for some caution to be given without full force and effect of the bylaw in those instances where it's not certain whether the motives of the complainant are frivolous and vexatious. So, but once you have several strikes, and then I think at that point it's clear that there's an enforcement time. So it was meant to have opportunity to have warning track. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bateman?
Thank you. Just one more question and just a quick comment on the slide. It showed for the pricing for inspection, just so I can understand. I'm sure any of the short-term accommodations will understand. There was a price for owner-occupied STA or Airbnb, and then there was a different price for room inspection for whole site Airbnbs. But if it's per room, I would think the inspection cost would be the same because you're inspecting the same number of rooms possibly. You could have a whole Airbnb that has less rooms than an owner occupied, but we're charging more. I just didn't know if there was a reasoning behind that.
Director?
The rational basis behind that is more of a probability curve. If you can picture that, the more rooms, the more probability of noise and other related problems, more parking issues, etc. And that curve is going to be steeper in a whole home rental as opposed to an owner occupied premise where there's an on-site manager. So I think there was a real cost associated with the number of added guest rooms.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rowley?
I do have another question. Is that okay? Page 265 is regarding parking. It's always parking. 5.3.19, the municipality may provide through conditions to the issued license the limited use of on-street parking. How will we deal with this? Who will make those decisions? And will there be a fee included in that as well? And with those STAs that we already have, are we going to kind of hold them to that as well? To kind of, we need to consider some of this off-street, on-street parking. So my question.
Director?
Sure. So the intent there was, yeah, we've got some if we have a problem with a bunch of on-street parking to the point where nobody else has the opportunity to have shipping, receiving to their home and buying appliances or whatever, then we have an issue. And that's a problem that needs to be enforced. So the intent there is to, no, we're not going to grandfather on-street parking. That's not a legal non-conforming issue. If you've been relying on on-street parking because it's spillover from your site because it's overoccupied and you can't handle all the parking, no, you won't be able to continue to enjoy that on-street parking. But there are mechanisms in here where you might be able to find relief from that through a permit if things are occurring orderly. So yeah, we will have to use some discretion there. And that's going to be up to our bylaw enforcement officer.
Permits will come with a fee, I'm assuming.
We do have the cash in lieu parking arrangement that is in the current zoning bylaw. There is no fee put into this licensing bylaw for parking. It's a good question. And I might say that once we have some experience with this licensing bylaw, there will always be some revisions and some experiential improvements to it. So that might, maybe I can start my list tonight with that issue.
Is that a follow-up? Yeah.
And just basically on that, as you say, this will be our first year with a bylaw like this. So maybe it should be something on the docket early 2023 that we maybe review some of the concerns that we've either missed, things that work, maybe things that don't work. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bateman.
Just a quick comment. It's not really a question. We've had multiple meetings about the SDAs, and I think it's important. I don't want to speak for all of council, but staff has put a lot of work into it. We've had a lot of questions and comments, but I don't want the public or SDA owners thinking that we're against. I'm all for Airbnbs. They're a vital part of every community, but this is just all of our questions, and I don't want to speak for everybody. It's just so that we get this right. We're not trying to stop them from coming to town or running. I just think that's important because we've had meetings where there's been quite a few owners online, and I got the impression from some of the questions that they felt that we were trying to get rid of them, and I don't think that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
I think that's a fair, pardon me, a fair comment. Councillor Riley?
I would just like to kind of add to what Councillor Bateman said as well, because we do realize what the importance of tourism is for communities like ours. However, these are still businesses, and they also it still needs to be a fair playing field for everyone for these ventures as well. And we need rules, policies, and oversight.
And unlike a business, like an accountant, we don't often have any issues with their clientele. And that's unfortunately not the case with short-term accommodations. Councillor LeBlanc.
I appreciate all the comments from council and the good work that staff has put into this over the year or year and a half since those are the motions been put in. And when we went through this, we came that we were going to have so many Airbnbs within a certain area in the street, and then we came with a percentage. And so if we have 5,500 homes, I'm good with numbers. Right? So if we have 5,500 homes in Brighton, and right now we have problems with 125 stats that are there. This is what brought the motion in and coming in to get this because of problems with noise and partying and everything. So we have 125. And if we have 15, so now we're going to add 800. So there'll be 800 Airbnb stats in the municipality of Brighton. We have a problem with rentals for homes. Some people can't rent homes and can't do stuff. I also know in some streets in Gosport, one wants to make the whole street Airbnbs because he's already bought 3 in the last couple of months. As soon as they go for sale, he buys them. So he's going to be a bit disappointed now that he can't go before 2023, which I like. But the thing is, if we have problems with 125, what are the problems that we're going to have? Do we have enough bylaws for 800? And then if you drive in Presqu'île, the one that they have in Presqu'île, they're not doing the driveways, they're vacant homes. You got to look at robberies taking place. You got to look at everything. If you come to that number of 200, like 4.5% or 5%, 250, instead of going to 800, because we got to have places and homes for our residents to rent at the same time. I agree with businesses and stuff, but you got to look at it. We still got to do stuff. We're building homes. We're building 720 homes. We've got a lot of, but stats are 800. And you know, in some of the streets in Orchard Gate, they're all bought, they're all rentals. And tonight and yesterday, I got called by people that have renters, that their people are coming and renting a home or renting their apartment, but not staying in it. They're renting it at a higher rate. And they're getting that because there's a shortage. So I don't want to create that shortage. And I think you and I have talked about this. And I know 15% sounds like a small number, but when you look at 5,500 homes, that's 800. We got problems with 125. I'm happy with 250. That allows business, allows growth, and it allows rentals of homes and apartments and stuff. So this is where I'm at. And if you're willing to look at that, and the rest of council is willing to look at that, that's where I would go. Instead of going to a high number, we can go to a high number when we have it to control. But if we don't have it under control, why would we go to a high number? Mr. Welch.
Comment?
To Mayor to Council, it's a good question, good point. And when you put it in the context of 800 STAs, that is a big number. The number 15% was chosen to try and keep somewhat of a balance between housing needs, making sure that the existing housing stock and future housing stock wasn't gobbled up by STA use. That the primary use of our housing stock was for primary residents. Housing is a need, shelter is a need. Let's keep it protected for such. Same time, recognizing that we don't really have a lot of tourist accommodation in Brighton, and it'd be nice if we got a hotel. Being off 401 is a bit of a challenge, so I'm thinking that maybe short-term accommodations is probably our best supply for the immediate future. Best hope for supply. Well, I won't say best hope. We can hope for better, but realistically, for the short term, I think we're looking at that being our primary supply of tourist accommodations. But so that's where that 15% came from. We can throw that down as an issue for evaluation after the first year, and see if we should push that number down or up. I think there's a question of pushing that number down more than up, but that 15% is probably really going to find traction in the areas that are of particular attractiveness and the destination as a tourist. So maybe some of the Main Street areas, some of the historical areas. This is what I'm hearing, that people from Toronto don't want to stay in a new subdivision. So my sense is that the newer homes aren't going to be at a big demand as some of the more established, unique places. This is what I'm hearing from the STA operators, people who invest in STAs. So it does sound like 15% is a big number, but I think out of that number, we can remove those homes that are probably not as much interest to the STA investors. So that will be a moderating or mitigating impact on our total housing supply to a positive.
Is it a follow-up?
Yes.
Go.
So, to you, Chair, to planner, I'm not trying to be hard to Paul. I'm Director of Planning. I sooner grow with the problem, start at 250 from 125, double it, and grow to 800, than to try to be at 800 and try to come down and see where we are there and doing that and having some controls. I'm for this, to have controls and everything, right? I don't want to see a Bloomfield. I don't want to see a Welland. I don't want to see a Picton and a whole bunch of other ones where they had no controls. And you know, you've been in those. I'm here for the residents of Brighton, and we hear it all the time. We can't get a place to rent. We can't find. We've been here residents all our life, and we've got to move. So I sooner go with the 4.5% and still go with all of this because I love what you've done. I love the concept, how you've done it, the rules, the regulations. It's a very good piece of work. I just think that number's too high to start. I think it should come down to 250, like 4.5, and then grow to 800. And that would be perfect for me. That's where I sit.
Go ahead. You have a comment.
Sure. Just to the mayor, to council, the 15% is in the zoning bylaw, And so council actually has already passed that. If we were to change that number, and I'm not saying I certainly would be open to it because there's no hard, fast reliance on that number, that we really should probably initiate another notice to the public and go through the usual process. But that's just a bit of logistics there. But I'm not shy of revisiting that number at council's wish.
So council, let's continue the conversation on the motion. And before we pass the motion, we'll have a sort of a sidebar conversation about the percentage. Is that fair? Councillor Anderson, you had a comment. Is it on the percentage?
Going to say on the percentage and one other thing.
We'll go to the other thing.
Well, it's tied into Councillor LeBlanc's conversation. So all I'll say is I agree with him. On the accommodation end, this would encourage accommodations coming to Brighton. If we kept the numbers lower, it obviously the demand is there and we all know it. So we're not fooling anyone. We're not being fooled. It's true, and I guess I'm going to speak a little further than I should, but about about rental accommodation, purchase, it does absorb a lot of that inventory that's available for residents to buy or rent space, because you can with a short-term stay or rent it 5 times a month. You get the same money. You get it if you rent it for a whole month. You don't have a renter. You don't have all those so-called issues with renters. You have one renter. They're in on Friday and they're gone on Monday. So that's why people like to go to this type of accommodation. It's less. And the other thing, hotels will also look at the amount of short-term stay you have within your community, because they're going to be competing with them in a way. They are definitely. It's not all about tourists. It's not just tourists that use these facilities. It's commercial accounts. It's sales, just the old style salesperson coming through town. Contractors are gobbling these places up. And with the amount of growth going on, commercial in not so much in Brighton right now, but in our neighbors, there's a lot of commercial going on down the road towards Belleville, Napanee. These guys will come to town, and girls will come to town, and they'll stay in one of those and go back home to Toronto or wherever they're from they'll go home on the weekend, but they're here for 5 days sharing with 3 other workers or 3 other colleagues. And they're looking for that. And the cost of them doing that is far less than staying in a hotel at $180 a night. And that's what this area tends to be heading that way, or at that point right now. So if we want to encourage, and we should maybe be even marketing to nail down a accommodation here in Brighton. And that was my point a while ago. But I agree with Councillor LeBlanc as far as how it's going to absorb some of that rental availability and other accommodation availability. And I think the manager, it'll be much better to be around 250 as well. So, that's all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on the motion with regard to fees and licensing? Okay, let's have a quick conversation about the zoning bylaw and what number we'd like to see in the zoning bylaw. And if the number is different than the 15% currently, staff will get the hint that maybe we need to see a report come back. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not sure that implementing this bylaw, I don't think the purpose of it is to try to get to 800. I think the purpose of the bylaw is actually to regulate and correct the issues or deal with the issues we've been having. I'm not sure if having a bylaw is going to necessarily attract more people to start these accommodations. I think they're going to think twice about it and make sure that they're actually serious about doing it the right way. I think this bylaw is to prevent what's happened in these other communities. So I don't think we're going to immediately all of a sudden go up to 800 because we have said in a bylaw 15%. Right now we have no cap. So I'd be much more willing to pass this as it is and maybe review in a year whether we need to do any adjustments.
So just to be fair and clear, the 15% is in the zoning bylaw and is not in what we're discussing tonight. So this is a sidebar discussion about a possible zoning bylaw amendment.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Council's passed the zoning bylaw amendment. Now the licensing would just simply take instruction from the zoning bylaw.
Right. So as we go around the table, Deputy Mayor, I'm hearing you're okay with the 15% that we've
Yes.
already passed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go down to Councillor Rowley.
I don't know what the number should be, but I think 15% as well is too high. We're not going to reach that this year anyway, as we're going to stay within what we have, but I think we need to reconsider that number.
You don't have a number in mind?
I don't have a number
Very
in
well.
mind. I'd say under 10.
So you do have a number in mind? Under 10. Councillor Bateman?
I don't have a number in mind either, because I don't think we have an accurate number of how many are currently in the municipality. That's really just a guess. You could be over that number now. So we're really just grasping at straws.
Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, it varies. We rely on a website called AirDNA, and it's Airbnb who has this website to promote investment into such facilities. And I invite council members to go onto AirDNA, and it's really quite detailed. There's a lot there. And every time I go on, it varies significantly, but it's around 40 total STAs. So not, enough, but, and I think growing, because I am getting calls about property up for sale. Can I buy it? Can I use it for an STA? It's not uncommon. We get a call maybe once a week, and sometimes more than once a week. But that's the scale that we're talking about right now.
So do you stick with your comment that you don't have a number in mind?
I don't really have a number, because right now, if you have an existing STA or an Airbnb and you sell it, that person that buys that home is buying it because they know it's an Airbnb and it's an investment property. So they'll have time, so that number is always going to be probably a little higher than some like and a little lower than others like, because it's not going to be as easy as what we want to regulate that.
Councillor LeBlanc, we've heard you say 4.5%.
Yes, and if we look at the numbers, like the numbers that you were giving was 125. I was surprised you came back with 40 because you gave 50 and 75. This is what I got written down. So that's 125. I figure if you double that to 250, it allows us to grow and see where if people want to come, they can come. But like I'm with Councilor Bateman, I think we're over 250, but then we're going to know exactly who's going to register. And they're not going to be able to bring people in because the neighbors around here are going to notice a new car every weekend. You can't say, don't tell my neighbor, just tell them you're my friend or you're my cousin. What's going on now? Basically, they'll have to be registered. And then the neighbors will turn them in, then we'll know who they actually are. But if you start with 250, then we see if that's not enough, we can go. If we're already trying to attract a motel, like Councilor Anderson is saying, it's hard if you got all that room availability. But the thing was good, and when we had the 15%, it was 15% within a certain district of so many streets. But this isn't. This is a 15% of 5,500 homes. It's not within so many streets or so many districts or a certain distance from one another. You could have a whole street of Airbnbs, and it could be all on the waterfront. That way, you would change your neighborhood. You would change the concept of the thing of Brighton. No big box stores, no stuff, and basically growing as a small community.
I think maybe there's a correction there, Director.
Yeah, in the zoning bylaw, you don't have that in front of you tonight, but in the zoning bylaw, it had the 15% is calculated on a distance. So in an urban area, I think if a license comes in and it's 123 Main Street, and it's arbitrary address. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to pick on anybody. And then we would calculate the density by measuring from that parcel about, I think, I can't remember the numbers now, 100 meters from that parcel, and capture all the parcels that fall within that arc. And if the total number of FSTAs captured by that arc is such that it's 15% or more of the homes, then that new application for a license is denied.
So it is intended to be a neighborhood cap, essentially.
It is. And this is going back to my earlier point that there are going to be some hot spots that people love to have their STAs because it's unique, it might be hip, it might be very attractive for whatever reason, such as the waterfront, as you alluded to. Well, those 15% densities will find traction very early. And some of the other areas, the new low densities subdivisions, I suspect that the number of licenses we get in those areas based on some STA investors that I've talked to, we may not get much of anything at all. So so that's been how it's been structured. So it is a site-specific density calculation every time a license comes in. So I'll be working very closely with my GIS person on that.
And there's at least one neighborhood in the community that I'm aware of that would likely not permit them under their covenants. So that would be a restriction that that neighborhood provides for them.
Right about it.
Yep.
One other thing. So
Without naming anybody else.
yeah,
Councillor LeBlanc?
to this. So I went through that bylaw when I went through it, the distance from house lot to house lot, the distance that you have. So the 15% of 5,500 homes is less than the bylaw of 50% per distance in the built-up area from what you can have, unfortunately. You could have 800 right in the built-up area. I've gone through it. And I asked my staff to go through it for me. So that's what I've asked them to do. I actually paid them a week to do it for me, to look at the Brighton, to look at our map and to do it. So the number in the built-up area, using that concept for the bylaw, is greater than the 15% that we have at 5,500 homes. So that's why I'm bringing it up now, because I thought that that would have been safe for us, going from property line, 60 meters from property line, and doing that 15%. We would have much more within the home. Because I am concerned about this, because as a councillor, I was elected to represent the municipality and all the residents, and to try to keep the culture and how we live and the status that we have, and not to destroy it. I know we all want businesses, we all want tourist dollars, but that's in the summertime. And so that's where we are. That's how it is. But if you go with the 15%, then they could be anywhere of 4.4%. It allows 250 wherever you want to put them in the municipality, rural, here, anywhere, and it gives you that number that fits all the municipalities from one end to the other. And that's what I'm concerned about, because I don't want to go down and read the newspapers and everything. Because I sat on, I was one of the members of this council when this was passed. I don't want it to come back and haunt me. That I could have done something or said something and not done anything. And I agree with bringing the businesses in. That's where I am, unfortunately. And the intent to bring in the bylaw, what you've written, I'm 100% for it. And the work that you've done is immaculate. But I'm stuck on this one number. And it's a democracy in the council. The council wants it. I will go 100% with the council.
So thank you for that. You've said 4.5%. I'm a good rounder, so I went to 5%, just so you know. And Councillor Anderson, I heard you say you agreed with Councillor LeBlanc, so I've got you at 5%. Yeah, and I'm fine leaving the zoning bylaw amendment that we passed at 15% for now, seeing where that might take us, knowing that it's neighborhood based, knowing that we're not talking about 50% of the whole community. We'd be talking about 15% of a neighborhood, and that likely there'd be lots and lots of areas of the community that we never see even 2%, or some areas we probably see nothing at all. So
Can I just touch on that?
you can.
You're familiar with what happened in the county. These things creep up on you, and I think we have something in place to, because we may not be here next year to make sure these things happen. But I'm just saying, what happened in the county, Paul?
Well,
Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry through you there.
Yeah, they have about 1,400 STAs.
What's that?
They have about 1,400.
I know, and if I can just communicate with you, the comment I hear from people that live there, and a lot of employees that work in the Belleville, Trenton, this area, they're driven out of their rental places in the summer. You can stay here for 3 months in the winter, but you're out of here. And so, yes, there's a huge demand in the summer, but the houses sit empty in the winter. Now it may be hearsay, but I hear it all the time. So I don't want to see somewhere down the road that we get into situation. And it won't be the entire community, I know that. But we have hotspots that could possibly be like that. And we need the rental space also for people to live, 12 months of the year. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In the case of Prince Edward County, I'd say the majority of those STAs were grandfathered.
sorry.
Were grandfathered.
Oh,
I don't really have the numbers down, how many were and how many weren't, but so that's my sense. This bylaw is tougher on what's going to be considered legal non-conforming.
And I would suggest if the county had a 15% zoning bylaw in the way we've written ours, or the way staff have written ours and council's passed, they'd be nowhere near 1,400, because those 1,400 are all centered around Wellington and Bloomfield in certain neighborhoods.
That's right. They predated the STA zoning bylaw amendment for the most part.
Right.
Yeah, there were dark streets that we were responding to. So there was abundance of STAs dominating neighborhoods before the bylaws got put in.
Right. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm confident in what's been drafted, that we're talking about what's happening in other communities. I'm confident that this is going to prevent what's happened in those other communities.
So council, quickly around the table, do we want to see a zoning bylaw amendment or zoning bylaw report come back to council with some discussion on that percentage? Yes or no? I can wait too. We'd be waiting a year to see how things roll out. Well, probably 2 years actually, because we'd have to get through 2023.
I think you've done an excellent job getting, it's right there. Got everything all right there. Why not have this one last part of it included in what we're doing?
So yes, you want something brought back.
What's that?
So yes, you want something
Yeah,
brought back.
I'd bring them back.
Yeah, Councilor Bateman.
We're asking if we want something brought back to look at the number
Right.
percentage again, and it's currently at 15%,
Correct.
and we don't even know if we're close to 15% yet.
Correct.
And when we determine how many we have, we can always adjust that 15%, or what whoever's sitting around this table can do that at a future meeting down the road, correct?
Right.
So I'm fine the way it is, as long as because mixed council can adjust that depending on the market. And if I could make one comment, we got to keep in mind that even if we limit Airbnbs, and I know we all keep saying that we want affordable rental units, but people, whether they invest in an Airbnb or invest in a home that they're going to rent out for long term, that's their right to invest. And there is no guarantee that they're going to rent that home for as much as we want them to rent it for $1,000 a month. They don't purchase an investment to lose money. So those homes that are going to be rental homes, they're still going to be renting for as much or more than STA. That doesn't mean we wanted to have thousands of them, but we can't set this in the community that we're going to have affordable rentals just because we limit STAs. Those are two separate issues.
Absolutely. So it looks like half want something come back, half don't.
I can help on this.
Sure.
If we are only giving licenses to existing till the end of the year, that gives us some good time to really take a look at the numbers and see what really comes in for licenses. And then council will have a really, more clear picture of what we're dealing with in 2023 in terms of pressure for STAs. If
So
that helps.
let me ask, will staff please bring a report at the beginning of 2023 to advise council how many licenses were reviewed, et cetera, for STAs, keeping in mind this discussion around the zoning bylaw and offering advice with regard to that zoning bylaw?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'll change based on what you just said. If that can be done, it will be done.
It's okay. We weren't voting. I was just
No,
asking politely that staff do something.
No, you made a good point that it's not just,
Yeah. So council of the day, the new council will get a report from staff, and please, Mr. Walsh, remember that it will be a new council, or maybe not, maybe everyone will be around the table, but in all likelihood, there'll be new faces. And so an opportunity for education as well. Go ahead.
Now, what you said, I can agree to, but if all of a sudden he starts going and he hits 300 and it starts going, could he come with a report sooner? Add that caveat to it?
Well, I don't think we need to add that caveat. I think Mr. Walsh would, some alarm bells will be going off if that happens. If we get to September and he's hit a pretty massive number. Mr. Walsh?
I agreed and acknowledged, and also I think we'll have some lessons learned between now and then. We may at staff level want to come back sooner than later anyway. So I think, we have to 2023 to learn the total number of existing, but even in the process of doing that, there'll be probably some refinements we might want to bring forward.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rowley.
I didn't mean to slap my
I
hand.
saw you waving your hands around.
I guess my question is just to kind of clarify, we are still going to move ahead with putting all of this into place regardless of where the 15% or
I'm
5%.
going to call the vote on the motion that is read, that we aren't
Right.
debating, but is on fact on the floor. Thank
Okay,
you for
thank you
that.
very
Yes. Councillor Bateman.
I'll just reiterate, I'm in favor of leaving it the way it is because I think the licensing process will flush out what we need to know, whether we have to go up or down, because it'll tell us whether we have a lot or we have few, but you also might have some in there that you lose that might not meet the standards that were on the screen. So once we get a true number, then we can determine what percentage we want this municipality to look like.
Yeah. Well, thank you for council's indulgence. We really debated two issues under one heading, but I think it was important discussion. So thank you all for allowing that discussion. Back to the licensing bylaw and certain authorizations, et cetera. Does anyone need me to read it again? It is before you. No changes were made or amendments were made. So all those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Councillor Bateman, would you please retrieve Councillor Tadman? Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. That brings us to unfinished business, and we have no unfinished business noted in the agenda, which takes us to bylaws. Our first bylaw is with regard to an agreement with Joule for tender PW 2021-18. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement between the corporation of the municipality of Brighton and Joule Engineering Incorporated for the engineering design services for the reconstruction of Harbor Street, Wallace Street, and Marina Drive. Is there any discussion? Councillor Bateman.
Just a quick question for clarification. I'm more for some residents that had messaged me. Some were under the impression that this included, because Harbor Street has sidewalks, but this is just the reconstruction or the design for the streets. So in particular, Wallace and Marina. I don't think we had a discussion on adding sidewalks to those two streets unless somebody else remembers that we did.
The only discussion we heard was Harbor Street, but I don't know that precludes these, although they do have ditches at the moment, and I can't imagine we'd change the stormwater drainage that dramatically down there.
I just told them that I would ask, and I wasn't sure who'd be here tonight, so.
We don't have the director here to ask
I
that
think we did,
question.
but I don't remember the discussion around sidewalks on Wallace and Marina. It was just the redesign of the roads.
I think it's, regardless of what we do, we still have to get the design work done. So if you wish to reach out to the Director of Public Works, that would be a fair question, I think, to ask of Preston. Anything further? Pardon? Yes. Go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
One other thing, with the two residents, when they reached out to me, apparently on Wallace and Marina Drive, there is drawings that when those streets were supposed to be built, they were supposed to be built with sidewalks. So I wonder if we have to still have those drawings.
I wouldn't know the answer to that question. That was some time ago. Yeah. Yeah. Deputy Mayor?
We always get this question about sidewalks, and then residents find out that we're going to take a bunch of their property or what they think is their property to make the sidewalk. So, and then they're not happy. So I'm not consent. I'm happy to just see where this goes, and we'll find out, because I'm not sure that it's always a good idea.
Fair enough. So we'll see where this design ends up, and Councillor Bateman, I'm sure you'll ask your question and we'll probably all receive the answer. Any further from members of council? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next item is the agreement with Neptune Securities for sidewalk, curb, and gutter repairs, moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement between the corporation of the municipality of Brighton and Neptune Security Services Incorporated for sidewalk, curb, and gutter repairs. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next bylaw is with regard to zoning bylaw amendment for 1276 Stony Point Road, moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council gives a bylaw. It's first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140, 2002, as otherwise amended, of the corporation of the municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 1276 Stony Point Road, described as Part Lot 23, Concession A, Parts 7 to 9 of Plan 39R 7389, except Parts 1 to 3 of Plan 39R 7939. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Next bylaw is with regard to a development agreement for Stephen Orr, 1276 Stony Point Road, and it's moved by Deputy Mayor Connect, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a development agreement between the corporation of the municipality of Brighton and Stephen Orr for the property located at 1276 Stony Point Road, legally described as Part Lot 23, Concession A, Parts 7 to 9 of Plan 39R 7389, except Parts 1 to 3 of Plan 39R 7939, Municipality of Brighton, as in accordance with subsection 59, sub 26 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P13. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. The bylaw with regard to short-term accommodation rental licensing, moved by Deputy Mayor Connect, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. That council gives a bylaw. It's first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to adopt licensing regulations pertaining to short-term accommodation rentals. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. And a bylaw to stop up, close, and sell a portion of Center Street, moved by Deputy Mayor Connect, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to stop up, close, and sell a portion of an unopened road allowance comprising a portion of the road allowance between lots 1 and 2, Concession 1, registered as Center Street of the former town of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. This brings us to question period. Are there any questions with regard to an item on the agenda from members of the public? Madam Clerk, are you aware of anyone joining us virtually? Thank you. We have no in-camera session this evening, which brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. Moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council gives a bylaw. It's first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the corporation of the municipality of Brighton planning meeting held on March 14th, 2022. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And we'll close with a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Deputy Mayor Connect, that the March 14th, 2022 planning meeting adjourn at 8:33 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Drive home safe, everybody. Thank you.